Damian Cole was a man who lived two lives, one in the glare of public success, and another in the quiet shadows of his own home. By day, he was the cold, calculating CEO of a billion-dollar real estate empire, commanding respect in boardrooms and striking deals that made headlines. By night, he was just a single dad, struggling to braid his 6-year-old daughter Lila's hair, burning toast, and reading bedtime stories with half-closed eyes. Since losing his wife 3 years earlier, Damian had buried himself in work, convincing himself that success would protect Lila's future, but what it really did was leave his little girl craving warmth he couldn't give. The company's annual gala was fast approaching, and though he had brushed off gossip before, this year was different. The board was restless, investors were murmuring, and his rivals whispered that a man who couldn't manage a family surely couldn't be trusted to manage partnerships. Alone again at the event, he would look weak, vulnerable, and in the high-stakes world of business, weakness was fatal. Damian sat at his office desk late one night, staring at the city skyline with a glass of scotch in hand, wrestling with the uncomfortable truth that he needed someone by his side, not for love, not for companionship, but for appearance. He had heard of discreet agencies that provided professional companionship, individuals trained to play the role of a date at social gatherings, blending seamlessly into any setting. It wasn't something a man like him would normally consider, but desperation outweighed pride. After one phone call, his profile was matched with a woman named Clara Hart, and when her picture appeared on his screen, Damian froze. She wasn't glamorous in the artificial way many of the women at his galas were. Instead, she radiated warmth, her eyes carrying a kindness that felt disarmingly genuine, her smile unpracticed, soft, and real. Something in him hesitated, a warning that he was opening a door he couldn't easily close, but he pressed, confirmed anyway, convincing himself it was only for one night, only for business, nothing more. Still, as he closed his laptop and turned off the office lights, a strange unease lingered in his chest, as though fate had just intervened in the carefully controlled life he had built brick by brick. The night of the gala arrived with the usual weight of expectation pressing on Damian's shoulders, the kind of night where appearances mattered more than words, and reputations were either strengthened or shattered under the glittering chandeliers of the Grand Regent Hotel ballroom. He adjusted his cufflinks with his usual precision, but when Clara Hart stepped out of the black car sent to escort her, Damian felt something shift inside him. She was breathtaking, not in a way that screamed for attention but in a way that quietly commanded it. Her navy blue dress flowed effortlessly, her hair framed her face softly, and her smile carried no pretense, only warmth, and for the first time in years, Damian found himself staring, not calculating. Throughout the evening, Clara played her role with elegance, introducing herself as though she had always belonged in that world, laughing at Damian's dry remarks, and charming investors with thoughtful questions that made them feel seen rather than scrutinized, even when one of his rivals tried to corner him with a thinly veiled insult about his incomplete family life. Clara disarmed the moment with a light-hearted story about a clumsy waiter spilling champagne that had the entire table roaring with laughter, leaving Damian both relieved and quietly impressed. He hadn't expected her to be so natural, hadn't expected to feel his own mask slip as he laughed along, realizing how effortless the evening felt compared to the usual stiffness of these events. But the moment that lingered in his heart came not from the boardroom elites or their shallow conversations, but from the small figure of Lila, who had begged her nanny to let her come just long enough to see her daddy before bed and who spotted Clara standing with him in the hotel lobby. Damian braced himself for shyness or discomfort, but to his astonishment, Lila's face lit up, her little hand tugging at his as she asked innocently, "Daddy, is she your friend?" Clara immediately knelt down, lowering herself to Lila's height, her eyes soft as she said, "Yes, sweetheart, I am," and before Damian could intervene, his daughter wrapped her tiny arms around Clara's neck in an embrace so pure it stole his breath. As he drove Clara home later, her laughter echoing in the car, Damian realized the night had changed something he could no longer dismiss. This hadn't felt like an arrangement at all, but the beginning of something dangerously real. What was meant to be a simple, temporary arrangement quickly began to unravel the boundaries Damian had carefully set, as Clara's presence in their lives became less about a contract and more about connection, and Lila's innocent insistence on seeing her every day made it impossible to maintain the pretense. Damian found himself altering his schedule, making excuses to spend time together outside the gala, whether it was picking Lila up from school or grabbing coffee on quiet Saturday mornings. Clara never complained, always bringing warmth and laughter into moments that had once been filled with silence and routine, yet Damian could not deny the tension building inside him, the unease of feelings he had no intention of admitting. Lila, sensing the shift, clung to Clara with unwavering trust, asking endless questions about her life, sharing stories she had never told anyone, and even sneaking her new friend little drawings and handmade trinkets that she insisted must be kept in a special box. Damian watched, a mixture of awe and fear curling in his chest, as Clara patiently guided Lila through life's small lessons, tucking her in at night and reading stories with animated voices that made Lila giggle uncontrollably. One evening, as Damian returned from work earlier than usual, he found them in the kitchen cooking dinner together, Clara gently correcting Lila's attempts to chop vegetables while exchanging teasing banter with him that made him laugh in a way he hadn't in years, a laugh that was real and unguarded. His heart ached because he realized that he had started to crave her presence, not as an obligation, but as a necessity he had never acknowledged. That night, as he tucked Lila into bed, the little girl looked up at him with wide, earnest eyes and whispered words that shattered his last defenses. "Daddy, can she stay forever?" The simplicity of the question made his chest tighten, his mind racing through the practicalities, the societal expectations, even the fear of losing control, yet he could not deny the truth any longer. Lila had already accepted Clara as part of their family, and in doing so, she had forced Damian to confront his own heart. He realized he wanted the same. The pretend arrangement had become something infinitely more real, more urgent, more fragile, and more essential to their happiness than he could ever have imagined, and as he closed Lila's door and leaned against it, he understood that the question she had asked was not just for herself, but for him too, and he knew he had no choice but to find the courage to answer it honestly. Damian had never been one to make impulsive decisions, but after Lila's simple yet shattering question, the walls he had spent years building around his heart began to crumble, leaving him vulnerable in a way he had not experienced since his wife's passing. The contract with Clara's agency clearly stated her time with them was temporary, yet each morning he woke to the sound of Lila's laughter echoing through the house, Clara's soft humming in the kitchen, and the warmth radiating from their small family. He felt a growing certainty that letting her go would be the greatest mistake of his life. He wrestled with doubt, fear, and pride, questioning whether Clara truly felt the same way he did or if she was simply fulfilling her professional obligations with skill and kindness, but every shared meal, every bedtime story, and every quiet moment of understanding made it impossible to pretend otherwise. One Sunday morning, as sunlight streamed through the windows and Lila attempted to stack pancakes into a tower taller than herself, Damian watched Clara kneel beside his daughter, helping her steady the wobbling pile while laughing at her own clumsy attempts to pour syrup without spilling it. Something inside him broke. He realized that this was not just an arrangement, not just a role played for convenience or appearances. This was life, real and raw, and it had been offered to him on a silver platter disguised as an accident of circumstance. Damian put down his fork and spoke the truth he had kept hidden even from himself. "Clara," he said, his voice low but steady, "I don't want this to be pretend anymore. I don't care about the contract. I don't care about appearances. I care about you. And I care about Lila, and I want you to stay." Clara's eyes filled with tears as she reached for his hand, her fingers curling around his in a gesture of quiet certainty, and for the first time, Damian allowed himself to hope. Lila, hearing the exchange, squealed with joy, bouncing in her chair as she clapped her tiny hands and shouted, "Does that mean she can stay forever?" Damian scooped both Lila and Clara into his arms, the weight of years of grief, fear, and loneliness lifting in that single embrace. "Yes, sweetheart," he whispered, holding them close, "forever." And in that moment, the single dad, the little girl, and the woman who had walked into their lives as a stranger discovered that family was not defined by blood or contracts but by love, trust, and the courage to embrace happiness when it finally appeared, uninvited but wholly welcome, in the spaces they had long thought empty.